Now that we've got some ideas to pursue for our poster, we've got our photo of the main artist, it's time to start building up layers. But before we do any of that, we have to start isolating things. So imagine that this is really truly, let's say it's a 4x6 photo. Anything below this layer is not going to show through. So this little icon down here next to the trash can is a new layer icon. If I click on it, I've got a new layer to work with. I'm clicking back on this photo. If I command click, so I'm holding on command or control on a PC and I click, it'll put the layer below it. So just a little quick shortcut here. Instead of just clicking a new layer and putting it at the top, I want this layer below. And the reason why, I'm going to come up here to my colors and just get a bright green right here. I'm going to hit Alt Delete. Alt Delete is the shortcut to fill your foreground color to the canvas. If I hit Command Delete, it fills it with whatever's behind here. So this background color that's white. So I basically fill this layer with white. I'm gonna hit Alt Delete again. I could go to Edit Fill right here or Shift F5. That's another way to do the same thing. So one thing you'll discover in Photoshop, there's probably 100 different ways to do the same thing. So these are just shortcuts that I've discovered that I use in my workflow. So Alt Delete, the whole reason I wanted to show you this is I've just filled this new layer with green. So if I turn off this photo layer, you can see my canvas is green behind it. Turn that back on. So this whole white area needs to go away, right? Or something else we can explore are layer styles. So right here we've got normal, but I can play with different layer styles. And what a layer style is, it controls how whatever layer you're selecting interacts with the layer below it. So right now I'm just clicking on it. Multiply is one we'll probably use a lot. And you'll see what it does. Multiply hides the lighter tones, but keeps the darker tones revealed, and then merges that with the layer below it. So, you know, if we change this canvas color, let's say to, in this case, a purple, I'll add a new layer. I'll just click on it, so it put it above the other layer, and I'll hit Alt Delete to fill my foreground color. So now he looks purple, but maybe I just want my background to be, you know, purple or green or a texture or a photo, and I don't want him to be part of that. So I'm gonna come back over here, and you could explore more. So here's another shortcut. I'll make sure your move tool is selected. Okay, with that selected on the layer you want, you can hit the Shift and plus or minus keys to cycle through. So right here, as I hit Shift plus, I'm basically scrolling through all these options without having to click on each one at a time. So sometimes, and that's kind of a creative effect right there, but sometimes, you know, that's how I'll find something I want to work with. So I'll just hit Shift plus and I'll just cycle through real quick and just see what different layer styles affect my image in different ways. In this case, I'm going to start with normal because I'd like to keep him black and white, keep his skin tone how it is. I want to just cut him out. So this is one of the most critical skills you'll learn in Photoshop. There's a lot of different ways to cut images out. One of the rough ways, I can hit the letter L and get my lasso tool, and I could literally start to just, you know, we'll just do a super rough cut here. Whatever I trace around, I'll get what we call these marching ants. Okay, so I've made a selection, and there's a lot of different ways to isolate the selection. I could delete it. In this case, I usually hit Command J, which jump cuts it up to its own layer. So if I turn off the original, what I've done now is I've brought this layer to the front. Obviously it's a terrible selection, and it's not editable, or it's not a smart object. It's destructive editing. Like, I can't ever bring back here where I didn't make a good selection. So making a selection with the marching ants tool and then just jump cutting it isn't probably the best way to work. A better way to work would be to, if you make a selection, to add a mask. So down here next to the FX, we've got this little square with a circle in it. This is a mask, and when I click on it, it remembers what's behind it, but now we're masking it. So anything black hides, anything that's white reveals. And I can click left or right here. If I click on the main image now, anything I would be doing would be on the actual image. If I click on this mask, now I'm working on the mask. So for example, let's say I want to refine my selection. I could get the brush tool. I hit the letter B, get the brush tool, and I'm going to go to Window, down to Brush, and now I can change different settings like how hard the brush is. I can select right here maybe a softer brush. I'll turn my spacing down. I'll bring my size up a little bit, and I've also got some other things going on. I'm going to uncheck these for right now. These are things we'll get into a little bit later. So I've got a soft brush, so I could actually come in here, and if I paint with black, so I'm painting with my foreground color, which is black, on the mask, so black is hiding. If I hit X, X is a shortcut right here to toggle which is in front. So if my white chip is in front. Now I'm painting with white, and white reveals. So you can come back in here and you could really, I mean, this is one way to work. You could zoom in and really, refine your selection exactly like you want it. Okay, that's one way to work. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off this mask. I can hold down shift and click, which just hides the mask. It's still there. Shift click to bring it back. Or I can drag it to the trash. Okay, now I'm back to the original image here. Another way to work, a newer tool, is this magic wand tool, which is kind of a combination. I'm sorry, not the magic wand, but the quick selection tool. It's kind of a combination between a brush and like the lasso tool, but in this case it's smart and it detects the color around the edges, so I can kind of just drag over everything here, and it's smart enough to know what to include and what to leave. Now, a problem you run into is areas like this where there's not a lot of contrast. Technically his shirt is still over here, but if I use that tool and I try and add that, it might work. In this case, Photoshop is pretty intelligent and it sees, but it's not perfect. There's still, down here it's having a really hard time. So, but let's say you're just trying to make a quick comp for somebody just to see if they even like it, and you don't want to spend a bunch of time cutting out this image. You could do a rough cut like this. Now, if I want to add more to this selection, right now it's really tough to see, but there's a little tiny plus sign inside of this icon. If I hold down Alt, it turns to a minus sign, and what that means is now I'm subtracting from my selection. So, oops, I took too much of his neck away, so I'll zoom in here, Command and Option. It's a shortcut for my zoom tool, or you can just click over here and zoom in anytime. And now I'm hitting spacebar to get my hand tool, which is right here. So anytime you can use your keyboard as a shortcut, that's obviously better. You'll be much faster. So Command spacebar, and now it zooms in, or Command Option spacebar, and I get my zoom out tool. Okay, so where were we? Oh yeah, we were on our quick selection tool. I'm gonna hit the Alt key. I'm sorry, I'm gonna leave it alone because I want to add back to this neck here. There we go. All right, so now I'm gonna zoom out, spacebar, Command, and Alt to zoom out. And let's do the same thing we did last time. Let's add a little mask. Alright, so this is better, a little bit better, but you can see we still didn't get everything in the shirt. The selection isn't quite right still. So this would be enough though if I wanted to just quickly mock it up and see if I like it. Alright, so for me, the best way to work, what I end up doing all the time, is using the pen tool. So we're going to zip through this pretty quick. It's kind of a complicated tool. I just want to get the principle to you, and then this is something we'll learn more as we go. But what I'm going to do is get the pen tool, and I want to make sure path is selected instead of shape. If it's a shape, you can actually draw new shapes and you can change the fill color, which is great, but right now all I want to do is I just want to use it to create a path and then cut out that path. So I'm going to delete that. My shape layer is still selected. I'll hit delete and it goes away. I'm going to hit P to get my pen tool, and I'm going to change this from a shape to a path. Okay. With the pen tool, again, it's something you'll need to practice, but you can click and drag and then click again, and you'll notice I've got my anchor point right here is where the path starts. It's going to go towards where this handle is, so it's going to bend towards that and then get down to here where this other point is, and it's bending up because of this anchor point. If I hit Command, I can get my selection tool and grab that anchor point and bend the path. So again, these are just handles to control this Bezier curve here. That's what we call it. And what I like about it is you can get really, really precise. So what we're going to do now is we're going to zip through this real quick. Over here in my paths layer, I've got that path, that work path. I'm just going to delete it. Yeah. We'll come back to my layers. All right, so here we go. I'm just going to go quick so you can see how I would do this, and then we can practice these skills more later. So if I hit the caps lock key, it changes my icon from just the pen tool to the precise marker here. So I've got my caps lock on. I'm going to zoom in real close. I'm holding down the space bar, hit Command. All right, now we're just going to start cutting this guy out here. I'll click, and then I'll drag a little bit. Now I'll hold down the Alt key to change to my this tool here. This is called the Convert Point tool, and it just helps you grab these anchor points, because otherwise what would happen is if I just hit my Command tool, see how it grabs that lower curve too and it bends this one? Well, I'm happy with this being here. Now I want to hit my Alt key to start bending this around. Alright, here we go. So we're just going to zip along this line real quick. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be good enough here to get our poster going. So let's just zip through this real quick. So I click and I drag just a little bit, and the reason why is so that way my curves are a little bit softer and they're not, let's say, like if I just click like this, they're not jagged. If I click and drag, right, and hit Command Z. Now in Photoshop, you have to hit Command Option Z or Control Alt Z to step back multiple. Otherwise, what happens if you just want to undo, you hit Command Z, it just toggles back and forth between the last thing you did. So you want to step forward or step backward by using Command Option Z. Okay. All right. So let's keep going with my selection here. Click and drag. All right. And what we're going to do now is when we get close to the hair, we're going to do a different selection method. And I'll show you that here in just a second. So we're going to keep right along his shirt. Click once, and then I'll click again and drag my handle this way so my curve comes along here. I'll click out, and the reason why I'm clicking dragging this way, so my handle, man, it's really tough to see on this image, but so my handle comes this way, and that curve, which you probably can't even see, oops, it comes along that neck. Now I'm going to hit the Alt key, and I'll grab that handle, and I'm going to bring it right around here so it follows his neck. I'm going to come up towards his hair, and now what I'm going to do is zoom out real quick, and I'm just going to get close. There's another selection method to get all this hair isolated. Okay, I'll come up past the canvas, and we'll come down here around here. I'll click once, and then I'll click again and drag. Click, drag. Come down here, click, drag to bend that curve. Okay, and now I just need to close that gap. So I'll come down here, click, click. And then when I hover over that open point where we started, my cursor changes to this icon with the pen tool and then the little circle next to it, meaning we're closing that path. Okay, so I've got my path over here, and what I usually do is I double click and I'll call it something. I usually call it just cutout, and what it does, that way it saves this path in this file. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to hit Command Return or Control Return to turn this into a selection. You could also grab that path again, right click, and make sure you've got your pen tool selected, and say Make New Selection. Click on that, and it'll make a selection. So again, we're just getting those marching ants, okay? Now I'm going to click on my little mask tool, and I've got this nearly perfect selection if I zoom out, okay? So the other thing I would do to polish this up a little bit, I need to add this little chunk here, so I'll just grab my pen tool, and I'll start, same thing, I'll just cut them out real quick. Got my selection. Now because I'll come onto this mask and I can fill it with black. So remember when I was filling with green and purple, I was holding Alt Delete to fill it with black. Well, make sure I've got, you can see this sub little box, make sure I've got that selected around my selection. Black's on top, I'll hit Alt Delete, and I've added that to my selection here. Okay? So now we've got a pretty good selection. Now what we're going to do in the next lesson is we're going to really refine this hair. So go ahead and play with this on your image, play with that pen tool, practice making your selections, and in the next lesson we're going to learn how to make really difficult selections with things like hair.